Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the February 3rd, 2023 version of the Boulder Council Breakdown. We are here this morning, Councilmember Folkerts and I, recapping the February 2nd meeting that we had last night. Lauren, there were kind of two big topics on our agenda last night, both right up your alley. Do you want to take us through a quick overview of what we accomplished last night?
Thanks, Nicole. The two big things we had on our agenda are big and small, right? They represent a really big effort from city staff to look at our site plan review criteria, which is basically when there are bigger projects in town, what they have to do to get a building permit. Basically, we require more from these large scale projects. And so this was a cleanup of those rules to make expectations clearer on both sides. Other than a couple fairly minor tweaks, we really went forward with what staff's recommendation was on this. It had previously received unanimous support from planning board. We also looked at use table updates. And so that's what people are allowed to do where. And it was something we had looked at before. Between the last time the city council saw it and this time, there were three main areas where they made changes. One was around office space and how much office space you can do in which zones and whether it can be on the first floor or not. Residential and how much residential is allowed in industrial zones. Those were the two that had the most contention around them. And I thought that staff brought forward a great option for both the office space changes and the residential changes. I tried to bring forward a small tweak to the residential changes. The main issue here is that we're in a housing crisis, but what we're talking about is adding residential uses to industrial zones. And it's important for our community to be complete, to have all the services that people need to live here. And so one of the concerns is you can sell residential for more than people can afford to run, specifically service industrial. So your auto mechanic, your appliance repair, those kinds of businesses are pretty tight margin businesses. That's kind of the greatest concern we had and why we didn't just allow residential to go everywhere in the industrial zones. My goal was to kind of reorient a little bit and to have more residential closer to the city center and look at in the future, expanding the service industrial zones that really do only allow service industrial so that more of that's protected, because not only are we seeing that service industrial use get priced out by residential, but right now we're also seeing it get priced out really quickly by office space and life sciences, particularly life sciences in our community. So just trying to put some more robust protections in place for that, I think will be really important as we move forward and look at the East Boulder sub-community plan zoning changes. The idea I brought forward wasn't taken up by council, but we did ask staff to look at it in module 3 of our use table update. Some people were surprised that I voted against doing that since it was my idea in the first place. I brought it up as part of this change that we were looking at because it was just sort of a small tweak to what we were already bringing forward. Planning and development services are so overloaded right now that we're really struggling to get to even sort of the beginning of our work plan items in that area. And while I like those changes and I think they'd be great, I'm mostly interested in moving forward with some bigger pieces of what we have as our council work plan priorities to bring forward what I see as bigger changes that are more helpful in combating our housing crisis.
Yeah, I really appreciated your efforts to find a compromise between what some of the developers were asking for in terms of more freedom to build residential, which does sell for a lot and pretty quickly right now, and also preserve some of that more service-oriented industrial space. So thank you for bringing it forward. And I wish that we had been able to make that little tweak, but I know some of our colleagues were concerned about not having quite enough time for engagement on changing those few blocks to be a little bit more residential oriented. Thank you for trying. One of the things that stood out for me in this whole process is how much work it took from staff to get to these little tweaks that we made. I think one of our commenters, public commenters last night in the public hearings was mentioning this repeatedly, that these are just tweaks that we're making. They're not sort of large scale changes, but seeing how many years this took and how much work and effort from staff, I think really emphasized to me the complexity of our code around what people can build and where and how much, and just the amount of time and the obstacles that we kind of put in place to allow people to do that because of the complexity of the code and all the regulations that have accumulated over the last 50 or 60 years. It's so much to navigate. And so even just making these little changes took 5 years because they started in 2018. And if we're really going to think about addressing our housing crisis, to me, there are some fundamental things that need to change about our code in order to make the process less complicated and take far less time so that we can respond more flexibly to our community's needs.
That's totally right, Nicole. The code system that we have around building and development is like a big snarl. You know, it's all tied together in really complicated ways, and to simplify it is, you know, something that I think we all are aspiring to and trying to push forward, but you know, pulling that thread out is really difficult at this point. So something I'm sure staff will continue to work towards, and hopefully council will continue to support. Did you want to give us an update on what we can expect in the upcoming weeks?
Yes, yeah, we've got some interesting public hearings coming up. So one of them is related to our state legislative agenda, and we'll have that public hearing next week at what would typically be a study session. It's going to be a special meeting so that we can have that public hearing on potentially making changes to our state legislative agenda. But I know that you were in our Intergovernmental Affairs Committee meeting yesterday, so maybe you can give us a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be talking about next week.
The sort of main changes to our legislative agenda that we're bringing forward are related to the city's housing, affordable, and transportation goals. Most of you are aware the governor's office is interested in doing some statewide housing and zoning reforms. And so we're looking at, you know, what would Boulder support along those lines, because in Colorado, we are a home rule state. So municipalities hold really strongly onto their ability to control some things at the local level. And one of those things is zoning and land use. And so this is a politically really fraught kind of thing. I mean, yes, we are absolutely in a housing crisis. And I think that it's, you know, really important to be looking at this issue across our entire state. And also, there's going to be a lot of opposition from a number of municipalities around this. In Boulder, I think we're going to be looking for a way that we can get to a yes and to supporting some of the things that will be brought forward on that front. We also are looking at funding and protecting the city's ability to reduce homelessness, and particularly item B, which is that we oppose preventing local governments from banning camping in public spaces. We're going to be bringing forward two different options. One would be modifying that statement to say if cities provide a certain level of service, whether that is shelters or various things, we would support saying only those cities can ban camping in public spaces. And then the other option is sort of eliminating that completely. The reality is, no matter what we change it to, we would have to, as a council, sort of review any policy brought forward on that front. There are some bills that are being brought forward that we think that our community will be excited to support. The community energy choice is one that, you know, our community has really fought hard to try and get in front of state legislators. There's likely to be a number of gun violence prevention bills, some things that are still in the works around vehicle environmental pollution and how that's both sort of noise and particulate matter, and how that is monitored.
So the other public hearing that we'll be having as we head through the month is some updates to our weed and trash ordinances. And that's going to be in a February 16th public hearing. Some folks seemed a little surprised that I voted no on first reading last night, but there were a number of questions that I had after reading the packet. And so I'm just waiting on some answers to those questions to address some of my concerns about who is included in creating those ordinances and the impacts it's going to have specifically on renters who, often are not the most flush with cash and able to afford some of these fines. And so the idea of making it easier for folks to be fined, I need a little bit more information before I can get behind that. Though I do very much support the idea of moving these violations away from criminal violations. And then we're also going to be having a public hearing on a concept plan review for redevelopment at 2801 J Road that will bring us 84 new units, for sale units, with 34 middle income affordable units. So we will be hearing some initial designs and plans for that area and giving some feedback on what we may like to see up there. Next week, we're going to be having a study session and discussion with Boulder Housing Partners. This is our affordable housing authority in Boulder. We've been having some folks come to public comment, just concerned about some of the management at Boulder Housing Partners. And so I think that's what has prompted this discussion. So we'll be hearing from their team at Boulder Housing Partners and just have a chance to ask some questions. Do you have anything to add about that, Lauren?
Well, I just wanted to say that, if people have questions or concerns that they want to email us, that, this was a really good time to do that. There isn't going to be a public hearing on that item. So it's really important to kind of give us your feedback or questions that you're interested in hearing us ask Boulder Housing Partners ahead of time.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Lauren. And I know that sometimes folks who are renting especially are not always feeling comfortable about bringing up concerns and things. So you are very welcome to schedule meetings with us as well if you would like to talk about that versus putting something into email, because as you may or may not know, anything that comes into our emails is a public record. And so if you have any concerns about anonymity or anything like that, please reach out. We're happy to talk rather than having you email us.
Did you have any other upcoming items you wanted to let us know about, Nicole?
I think the main other things that come up, I did want to mention last night on our consent agenda, we approved launching a pilot incentive program that's going to help Boulder County landscapers who are providing services to customers in the city of Boulder adopt electric commercial grade landscaping equipment. We've had a lot of folks in the community who are really concerned about the emissions that are coming from this landscape equipment and these smaller engines. And so this, I think, will be a really neat opportunity for us to see about helping people transition to electric landscaping equipment. So we approved the intergovernmental agreement that gives us funding for that program. And we will have, I think it's almost $270,000 going toward that program this year. So that's pretty exciting. We're also going to be getting an update on the Day Shelter Navigation Center and how the request for proposals went and who applied for that, and get some information on that, not as a discussion item, but as an information item.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. And I know you always have a great list of things that are coming up in our community. You want to hit on some of those?
Yes, definitely. For anyone who is available for a more intensive engagement opportunity, a group called Harvest of All First Nations is leading a solidarity and anti-racism learning program. This is going to be a 6-session course that begins on February 7th, this Tuesday, and runs approximately monthly from 5 to 8:30 p.m. at the dairy. Harvest of All First Nations is creating a lot of connection in our community. They're an Indigenous-led cooperative that empowers communities through projects and education. So that should be a really phenomenal opportunity. And they have scholarships available for folks who are not able to afford the cost of the training. Also, I keep plugging this every week, and I'm going to continue plugging it because it will be amazing. The Boulder County NAACP Freedom Fund celebration is coming up with the Nashville African American Wind Symphony. That's going to be at 3 o'clock on February 19th at CU in Mackey Auditorium, and it will be spectacular. We were able to have a declaration for Black History Month last night and heard about some of the other opportunities that are coming up this month. Big shout out to the NAACP for all the work that they're doing to bring us celebratory and joyful events for Black History Month and really increase our community's awareness of the excellence of our Black community here in Boulder County. So very excited about a lot of these opportunities that are coming up. For anybody who hasn't seen it yet, there's also going to be a screening of the film, This Is Not Who We Are, at CU at 3 o'clock on the 9th. And there'll be a panel discussion with the producer, one of the producers, Katrina Miller, afterwards. So you can go online and sign up for that. But really wonderful events coming up this month. I'm very excited to celebrate and get more educated with the community.
Those all sound fantastic. And thank you, Nicole. And thanks everyone for joining us for this episode of the Boulder Council Breakdown. If you see us at any of these wonderful upcoming events, please feel free to say hi.
Another thing that I wanted to lift up for any artists or anyone organizing a community event that involves dancing or singing or weaving or some other form of art, the Arts Commission has grants available to community members, and different types of grants have different application due dates throughout the winter months. If you go to boulderarts.org/2023-grant-program, you will find all of those opportunities. Please reach out to our arts folks if you are interested in applying for any of that funding.
I also wanted to mention a couple of ways, other than seeing us at these wonderful events, that you might be able to impact what's going on in the city. So on Be Heard Boulder, we're looking for public feedback on ADUs, on streets as public spaces, and on our weed and trash ordinance. And RTD is also looking for feedback on the Northwest Rail peak service
Study.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful week.